Scott, what's up, bud? Great to see you. Thanks
Nice
for coming in.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. How long did it take you to get it today?
It took me 45 minutes from Queens. Not bad.
Okay, not
45-minute drive. Yeah, not too
Came
bad.
from Queens, not the city?
Yeah. No, I came from Queens.
Where's your office?
Kew Gardens. We have 2 offices in Kew Gardens, and then we have 1 office on Wall Street.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Where on Wall?
30 Wall Street.
30 Wall, okay.
Yeah, it's like right next to the Trump building.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, how long are you there for?
We've had that office actually for probably 7 years now.
Oh, wow.
I've seen the area grow. Like that area, so like when we got the office, it was sort of, the area was sort of dead. It was like around COVID, a little bit pre-COVID, but then COVID happened. A lot of people started working from home, but now you have a lot of those new developments coming up, residential buildings. We've actually done a lot of closings in that area.
Okay.
Specifically with the FIDI office.
Sure.
With Andrew Ziff and his team. So there's been a lot of development.
Movement down there.
Yeah, a lot of development, residential, which everything comes to follow after you start building buildings. Right?
You seeing that world come back to play where a lot of people are going back to work? Or?
I think so. I think that a lot of people are, starting to, I think they're sort of gotten bored of the work from home sort of mentality.
Sure.
I think some employers too, I mean, us included, right? We sort of have the mentality, I mean, we didn't have employees come in, but I was going into the office every day during COVID. I mean,
me too.
We sort of, I think you just are more productive. And I think a lot of employers have started to see that, where they prefer people coming in, at least a hybrid schedule. But I think people are just generally more productive. Not always, but from my experience, I would say more productive.
Sure. It's funny. I remember COVID. I remember we bought the Market Center in New York City. I would call my regional owner every couple of days, and one day he's sitting there and he's like, how's things going working from home? And I just remember telling him, it's bad when you start watching Vanderplus Rules or whatever.
Vanderpump Rules.
And I'm like, that's when you know it's bad, when you can't work from home, and you're looking forward to the Zooms.
You're like, oh, when's the next Vanderpump episode?
I was excited to watch Vanderpump
Bravo
Rules.
TV never became so intriguing.
It was so funny. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Anytime I got a chance to get out of the house and go to the office, I went.
That's what we were always. I was always trying to find any excuse to go and. Again, it was funny during COVID. I mean, fortunately for us, we were able to grow during COVID.
We did, yeah.
And we were able to take that opportunity as opposed to everybody was sort of a lot of uncertainty, but I think we took it by the horns a little bit and we
How long did it take you to get back into the office from COVID? Were you like me the day of? You freaking got Fantastic and went in. And
yeah, I mean,
$80 for a bottle of Fantastic.
We were in the office. My brother and I were in the office immediately. I mean, we never stopped working, but we sent everybody home, and then I think once everybody started opening up is when we had everyone start coming back to the office. Those were interesting times, though.
Yeah.
It was like
I had a time where one of them kicked me out of the office building. Not kicked me out. They told me you got to leave.
Yeah, they told you. Yeah.
And I said, wait, excuse my language. You're fucking charging me rent.
Yeah.
And then you're telling me I can't be here. Go fuck yourself.
I mean,
pick one.
Thankfully, we didn't have that issue, but I guess a lot of people they should have been. Yeah, I know they should have been happy you were there, right? You're still paying.
That's right.
A lot of people were not paying.
That's right.
During that time.
We're paying. You're telling me to pay.
Yeah.
And then you're telling me not to be in, and I'm like,
no, that's sort of.
And you wonder why. That's like it's not fair.
Yeah.
But I was in. After that, they didn't give me a problem. It was like, okay, you can come in. Make sure you're careful.
If they want, I mean, look, for landlords in that time, having a happy tenant was priceless because there was unfortunately a lot of people that were using that. I mean, look, and some people they needed to, but others were sort of using the circumstances to say, maybe I'll. Can you give me a cut on rent? Give me a little bit of a cut.
I didn't take anything.
No, we didn't either. We thankfully, we just sort of we put our head downs and
worked through it.
Yeah, worked through it. And honestly, again, unlike some other firms where our practice is sort of like we don't just do one thing. And unfortunately, for the firms that only did certain things, like for instance, landlord-tenant, the landlord-tenant, the housing courts were shut down. Foreclosures were stayed. There was the moratorium on foreclosures. So you saw a lot of firms sort of just not be able to survive.
I wonder what that looked like the courtroom's just completely empty, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's kind of like that now a little bit still in the sense that they've converted a lot of hearings to virtual still.
Is that right?
Yeah, like even the foreclosure settlement conferences are all usually virtual now. They sort of adopted a lot of things that, we sort of took on during COVID as the normal day-to-day.
What's criminal court like now? Do you know?
Criminal court, I'm not sure. I don't really do a lot of criminal, but I would say, I've seen it online. I mean, even the arraignments, things like that, they do that. They do a lot of virtual. Again,
still virtual.
People are, the courts have used these sort of tools to their advantage just to help, sort of streamline the
things along.
process. Yeah, I mean, because that was the one thing, and that's still the one thing that sort of is unfortunately why certain cases take so long is that, the courts are so backlogged. The dockets are, insane. So, any way that you can sort of help streamline, make things quicker, see as many, cases as possible, I think they're going to try to do. So I think that's a good thing.
I remember as a cop in the 90s, they were going to video booking.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was the worst. It was
Yeah.
longer than regular.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is always a transition period of like you have to sort of get the kinks out because there's going to be a time where it probably ends up taking longer and making things take longer. But then once you sort of get all those kinks out, it starts to help the process. And I think now, especially for landlord-tenant court, where we sort of need that. I mean, we have a pretty large landlord-tenant practice as well. I handle most of the transactional. My brother Mark is the managing partner for our litigation practice. And, those cases, that's the one thing where we really need to see, sort of these tools be implemented because there's so many cases. I mean, in the Bronx alone last year, I think there was 40,000 eviction cases filed. Staten Island was
How many went through?
That I don't know
Two?
exactly. Kings in the Bronx were tough. Manhattan, New York County, and Queens are, a little bit easier. And then Staten Island, there's really only a couple thousand cases filed each year because it's just its own sort of separate borough. But, if they can utilize certain tools like, the virtual hearings, things like that, hopefully that could help streamline these processes. But unfortunately, evictions in New York City do take a while.
Time, it's ridiculous. I won't buy a property in New York City.
Yeah,
I would, but
that's what you're seeing a lot of investors. I mean, we represent a lot of investor clients, and you're seeing that now where they're sort of thinking, hey, well, if I buy this property and then God forbid if it's a multifamily, it's a 3-family, 4-family, one of the tenants stops paying, again, you're taking out a mortgage most likely, and it's a commercial loan, so the rate's probably higher, and and they can't risk the chance of somebody not paying because if they don't pay, it could take them 8 months to a year to get somebody out, depending on the borough, and it's like that's 8 months to a year that you're now losing on your your revenue, and your cap rate is skewed completely, and it's going to impact the value of the property. So. Yeah, that's unfortunately something that I've seen. I have a lot of clients. We also were licensed in Florida and New Jersey, so I do a lot of closings in Florida and New Jersey. And Ohio as well. Those are other states where you see people starting to, look into and consider investing into outside of New York. Yeah.
I'm in Indiana.
Okay. Yeah. Same idea, right? So it's like
Cleveland.
Exactly. Yeah. Cleveland. Yeah. We see a lot of myself included, Akron, Ohio, Cleveland.
Akron,
yeah. So those are
It's a nice area, Akron. Huh?
Yeah. Those are some hot spots though. Again, because the entry into the market is not as demanding, and then there's also less risk, right, in terms of evicting and things like that, where these process the evictions take a month or 2 months versus 8 months or a year.
Like 90 days, not even.
90, the notice requirements are much different. Everything is just much easier to get people out if they're not paying, unlike New York. Again, for better or for worse, that's just the reality of New York City. So
it's funny. My aunt used to tell me with the New York buildings, don't buy anything under an 8-family.
Yeah.
I was with her not too long ago, and she's like, now it's don't buy anything under a 30-family. It's like, okay, where are you going to find a 30,
Yeah.
you can afford it.
No,
now,
yeah, exactly.
And it's just gets crazier and crazier in the New York market. And
then you got the rent stabilization laws with anything over 6 families.
What was that new law that just came in effect in New York where...
Good cause eviction?
Correct.
Okay, the good cause eviction law basically states that if you're considered what the law considers as a large landlord, which is anything over 10 doors.
Yep.
Now, not 10 properties, they count by the unit. So if you own, 3 families and then a single family, that's 10 units,
doors,
10 doors. So that just basically means that if your tenant is, paying and their lease expires, you have to have good cause to not renew their lease. In other words, you have to give them a reason to not renew. There are certain exceptions, like I'm moving a family member in or something else, or non-payment of rent obviously is good cause. But if they're paying rent on time and they haven't, breached their lease, you can't just
do anything.
You can't just say I'm not going to renew your lease. It basically sort of is aligned with how rent stabilization works, where again you're required by rent stabilization law.
What's the increases now?
It's
2%.
I think it's like 2 or 3%. It really is, again, whatever the board ultimately ends up voting on each year. But yeah, I think it's around there. But yeah, these laws, these changes in the laws, they're constantly changing, which sort of makes it difficult for landlords in general, unfortunately, to sort of do things on their own. I mean, I've seen
Sure.
time and time again landlords try to, serve the tenant the proper predicate notice that's required under the law. And unfortunately, there's so many additional, it's not just, oh, you give them 30 days, 60 days, 90 days notice. You also have to attach a bunch of documents to that notice, and it has to be served in a specific way, whether that's personal service or certified mail. It's become pretty difficult for, people to sort of follow what the new rules are and what the new laws are, because it's evolving constantly. And, that's why we're here, right? That's part of our practice. That's something that we do as well in terms of litigation. We sort of guide our clients through that process and make sure everything's done according to what the law requires. But still, it is unfortunate that it is that difficult to sort of read through what you have to do in order to properly serve someone.
And then what was the new one with like the Section 8s and the vouchers? Like there was a new.
Yeah, so I think they just recently, a new law. I know that recently for the brokers, the judge just ruled like yesterday,
A couple weeks ago, a week ago, whatever.
Yeah,
it is, right?
about not, you can't discriminate, or you can. In this case, they can consider
Salary.
Yeah, the salary. But in terms of litigation, again, Section 8 sort of falls into that line of additional notice is required for Section 8. Like people with Section 8 vouchers, if you're going to evict, you have to serve Section 8 as well. You don't just have to serve the tenant. So there's a lot of nuances to that process that I think people unfortunately just don't know about. And there are resources online, but that's why you have attorneys too that specialize in a certain area that can help you navigate the complexities of it, basically.
So Scott, it gets a little off track here, but where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Sayville, New York.
Okay.
Long Island. Went to Sayville High School, Sayville Middle School, and I went to Lincoln Avenue in Sayville. And then I grew up there. Great place to live. I can't complain.
Grew up playing sports or anything like that?
I ran. I was a runner.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
Track and cross country.
Julia does.
Yeah, that's what I was. I was
You ever
tracking.
do a marathon or no?
I did a half marathon.
Okay.
And then I one day I'm keep telling myself I'll get to a marathon, but I unfortunately have been working. So
hard to train.
working gets in the way of training. But I think one day I will definitely do a marathon. I did the Brooklyn half marathon. That was a great experience. It was something I just wanted to try to do. It's sort of.
When did you do it?
That was I think it was right. It was right before COVID. I think
Oh,
it was
wow.
like it was 6 years ago or something like that. Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah.
So you grew up in Sayville.
Yep.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Sayville High School. Yeah.
No, after high school.
I went to Stony Brook for undergrad,
Stony Brook for
Yeah,
then
Stony
where'd you go to
Brook.
law school?
and then Hofstra Law School.
Hofstra Law. When
Yeah.
did you go to Hofstra?
It was actually a few years ago. I graduated 20. What was it? 2020. It was like right. It was like
Oh, wow,
right around
you're
COVID.
very
Yeah.
young.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was my
God
sort
bless.
of process of getting to law school. I didn't do the normal route. So I was a paralegal, real estate paralegal, for 10 years before I went to law school. So I didn't go right from undergrad.
What made you?
I think COVID happened. I also, I think the legal profession, your license is sort of priceless in the sense that, like, you can do so much with it. I was always intrigued by real estate. I was a real estate broker myself.
Okay.
I had an independent brokerage. I did it myself, and I was always involved with real estate. I didn't grow up in a family that had anything to do with real estate. I sort of learned on my own and
How about law?
Law, no. I mean, my brother is the first attorney in our family, and then
wow.
I'm the second attorney in our family. So
Mom and dad have to be proud, right?
yeah, I think so. I hope so.
God bless.
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, I mean, I didn't do like the normal track right from undergrad to law school. I took several years in between. Worked.
Glad you did that, or?
I am. Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
I am. My brother and I, we always sort of had a plan to come together eventually and sort of do what we're doing now, which is to sort of
How about your brother?
build our firm.
Did he do it
He
right?
did. He went right from undergrad to law
I would say
school.
that would probably be easier though.
I feel like it's interesting because I have sort of an interesting perspective from watching people do that, where like I was in law school at the time when people were coming right from undergrad to
Sure.
law school, and I do think that
You were a lot more mature.
I was
obviously.
more mature, but also I think the work ethic. Like I worked full time while I was at law school, so like it's just you come from going to school where like you can sort of maybe not go to class, go to class. You could study for the exams the night before,
Yep.
like in undergrad. law school is different. It's
Oh,
a
I
different
know.
animal. So I feel like, you have to bring a certain work ethic to that, which I think you can learn. It just, it sort of is a bit of a slap in the face a little bit in the beginning for people that weren't used to maybe putting in that kind of work. I'm working, again, I work every day and I know what it's like to put in the hours, and I had no issue. I treated it just like I would any other job, and that's what it was for me. It was just
What's the hours that you have to put in? And I know everyone's different because that's one of the reasons I didn't want to go to law school was I just knew it was going to be
yeah. I mean, I was in the library every day.
Yeah.
You know,
because it's all research, right?
yeah, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of
Yeah.
reading. It's a lot of going over cases, sort
All
of
case law,
yeah,
right?
yeah, reading cases and then briefing cases and being prepared to discuss the cases in class, because the infamous cold calling in law school where you get called on.
Sure.
And you're not
prepared.
expected to be
Yep.
to called on. That's sort of what people are scared about when they hear law school. So yeah, you have to be prepared because you're in a class of 180 people and you're being called out or singled out to discuss a certain case and answer several questions about it. And yeah, I think that can be sort of a daunting thing for a lot of people. But it's like anything, you prepare, right?
Do they like put you in groups or?
No, normally, I mean, there's certain group, I think, like certain group projects in certain classes that you would maybe participate in, but generally speaking, it's really just, your individual, like, you're going over the cases. And in law school, too, it's not like other colleges or undergraduate degrees where, your whole grade relies on usually just the final exam.
Sure.
So I think people are not used to that either, right? It comes down to pretty much one test, and unfortunately, some people can have a good day or a bad day. On that day, and you have to just prepare as much as you can, like anything, right? You have to make sure you're.
What's a law school test like? What is it? Is it multiple choice? Is it?
It depends. It is a mix. I feel like a lot of the classes usually have a mix. I would say there's like a few multiple choice and then a lot of writing. Most of it, I would say, is writing heavy. But yeah, there are certain classes where they'll throw in some multiple choice because the bar exam has multiple choice. So they're sort of trying to. I think every class is built to sort of help you sort of
Pass the
prepare
bar.
for the bar exam. And the bar exam does have 200 multiple choice, and then there's a writing portion which is one day, and then there's a multiple choice which is the second day.
And the writing portion is what, 40% of the grade, or?
For the bar exam,
Yeah.
I don't know how they split it up exactly, but I mean, I think the multiple choice is actually a significant portion. It's the MPE, that's what they call it. It's a significant sort of portion of the exam, and it's actually interesting because you can now, and I don't know how long this is going to be in place for, but they have the uniform bar exam, which you can transfer your score to other states.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, like for instance, like if you pass the bar and you get a certain score in New York, you can transfer that score, provided it's a passing score in other states, to a certain state that accepts the uniform bar exam.
Oh, wow.
There's certain states like California and Texas that don't.
That won't, yeah.
But like New Jersey does, I think Connecticut does, other states, Florida doesn't, unfortunately. But there's other
Florida's
states.
not.
Florida's not uniform bar exam. You have to take their Florida bar exam. Same thing with California, Texas. You have to take those bar exams to be able to practice law in that state.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because you can really, again, you could sort of, it gives it your ability to sort of practice more like options, I guess. In terms
I'm sure
of
you
where
passed it on the
practice.
first time.
I
or?
did pass it on the first time. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I prepared a lot for it.
Yeah, I remember that being a hard test.
Yeah, it was a hard exam, but like I said, I tell this to everybody, and I think some attorneys, you'll speak to some attorneys and they'll tell you, "Oh, don't go to law school. Don't do it. It wasn't worth." Like, I think you should do it if you want to do it. I think it's like anything. You put your you put your mind to it and you work hard enough, you can absolutely be successful in it. It just takes a lot of work. I mean, it's like anything. You got to put in the hours.
Did you take the LSATs? Or?
LSAT I took. Yeah, LSAT I took. LSAT I was not great. That's a different type of
Really?
exam. The LSAT is
Yeah, I
a
remember that, yeah.
it's a different type of exam than like actual law school exams.
right,
That's
yeah.
more of like an SAT, ACT type of
Yep.
exam, which I was.
And that was a
never-
percentage, right? They didn't go on grade or something.
yeah,
like
that
So I remember
they
taking
go
that.
on they go on that, plus the law schools will consider your LSAT, but then they'll also consider your undergraduate
Grades, yeah.
grades and things like that, and that's how you sort of apply for law school and get
But the
into law school.
LSATs don't only help with your grades, right? It doesn't really. If I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken, they don't really.
yeah. I mean, I think look, there's people who
You're not
abs-
getting into Harvard because you're LSATs.
Yeah, there's certain, for the most part, I would say yes. There are certain scores on the LSAT if you're scoring like top 1% of what you could, at that point, then yeah, I think that's sort of an outlier grade that will help you get into those top 10, law schools. But they consider several other things as well. It's not just the LSAT. They'll consider your work history, your grades, your writing samples, recommendations and references and things like that. There's, several things that they'll consider.
I remember a buddy of mine growing up. I'm not going to mention names. He'll know who he is if he's listening to this. He was top 10% on the MCATs. and top 20 in LSATs, and all he did was brag, and he became a school teacher. Just like, I don't know why I find that funny. It just
Yeah, no. To each his own, I guess,
Yeah.
right? You take. I mean, it's look.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
He's a smart guy, but he's a science teacher now. But okay, so you go to law school.
Yeah.
When did you graduate?
I think it was 2022. I think.
Wow.
It was too recently.
You're like a baby in this.
Yeah.
But you did 10 years in
Yeah, but I
paralegal.
did. Yeah, but I did several years. Again, that's the thing. So it's sort of
That's
like
awesome.
I was sort of prepared for.
You're
I've been doing this for a while, and I sort
Sure.
of just had to go through the motions of getting the degree. Again, my brother and I had a plan to sort of build our firm.
Did you work for your brother's firm when you were?
Yeah, so
paralegal?
I worked while I was in law school. I worked full time, at his firm. It was at that time. It was he was solo practice. Now, fortunately, we have a full
Sure.
practice and firm and team.
What does your firm consist of right now?
So we have 5 attorneys, and we have a staff of about 8 paralegals, legal assistants, things
Yeah, I
like
was just
that.
asking you, what does that look like? I come to you. What kind of law do you guys?
So we do primarily. So I manage our transactional department, which basically is the buying and selling of co-ops, condos, townhomes, single family, multifamily, and commercial. I also do commercial leasing. We do a lot of commercial leasing for retail tenants, whether it's landlord or tenants. In some cases, some national tenants as well. And then we also have a litigation, practice, which involves a lot of landlord-tenant, commercial and residential. We primarily in residential represent the landlords. Commercial will represent tenants and landlords.
Which one do you? Well, not that it matters, but which one would you prefer?
I mean, I think commercial landlord tenant generally, whether it's landlord or tenant side, is very interesting. It's a very interesting area of the law. It's much more complex than what you think of normal landlord tenant law, like in the residential setting. These are again, you're sometimes litigating over very complex issues with commercial leases, which are generally complex. I don't know if you are familiar with a commercial lease versus a residential. If the people that are listening aren't familiar, it's basically, a residential lease could be, 5 pages long. A commercial lease can be 100 pages long, right? And they're a lot more complex, and there's a lot more provisions in there, which just results in, it's funny to say this, but it just results in more potential issues that could come up. But I like, again, I'm not really handling much of the litigation, but I do handle a lot of the negotiations leading up to the litigation in terms of the actual leases themselves. So it is sort of an interesting thing. I think we always like to say this, my brother and I, a great litigator requires being really a great transactional attorney. You sort of have to understand these leases and understand, the negotiations of these leases and what provisions are included in these leases.
How do you become an expert in that? Just reading leases.
I think
all day,
I think seeing different leases. I mean, I've reviewed. I can't even tell you how many commercial leases I've reviewed, or just leases in general. But I think just going over leases. And then seeing the issues be litigated, right? You sort of see the issues that come up in these leases, which again gives you a better understanding of what you want to sort of, kind of built into these leases to protect your clients, right? If I'm protecting a tenant, I want to make sure that there are certain provisions that help the tenant and vice versa.
How much of that goes back and forth? Like I know it's a game, right? Where you're going back and forth to correct.
Yeah.
Like what's that like? Take us through that. Like I do a commercial lease. We'll go commercial first. I'm doing a commercial lease for 10 years. What are the things you're looking at as a buyer, and then what are you looking out for the landlord?
Yeah, so from the tenant side for commercial leases, obviously it's like any other real estate transaction. It starts off with an LOI that's circulated by the brokers, and then the attorneys sort of jump in and get involved. And then from a tenant's perspective,
How much do you want the commercial broker involved at that point? I want you to be honest. I want you to. You're perfect.
So the way that I approach
transaction.
the way that I approach every transaction, whether it's a leasing transaction or like just a regular buy or sell transaction, I personally like to have the brokers involved. And the reason why is because the brokers, they're the ones who negotiated the deal. They understand the property. They understand the clients. I use that as an asset as an attorney, right? Because if I need to bounce certain things off of them, I know that they can tell me certain things that I might not otherwise get from the attorney that's representing the other party, whether it's the landlord or the buyer or seller, whatever the case may be.
So the broker's a leverage piece.
I think the broker is an asset, yeah, and I don't think that necessarily every attorney might agree with that. I think the attorneys, when they sort of get involved, they sort of take they take it from there, and they say, if I need you, I'll reach out, but let me sort of take it from here. And to an extent, I understand that, but I do think, and again, with my broker partners and the brokers that I work with, the relationships that I sort of build with the brokers, I think it's only beneficial to our clients, which at the end of the day is all that matters, right? You're doing it for the client. You're putting the client first, and I'll do anything that I think will benefit the client. And if I think involving the broker is going to benefit my client, I'll do that.
Why do you think the attorney? And again, I'm pretty much straight up here, so it's I'm not offended by anything when it comes to this because I see all sides.
Yeah,
and I really do. But why do you think that is? Is it more that the attorney is just thinking that the broker's just on the one side and he's not looking at it with a clearer vision of?
So I think that sometimes
that's why they don't want to get them involved.
I think that, look, there's some cases where I think brokers are maybe a little bit more inexperienced, which I can see why maybe the attorney then would say maybe it's best if you take a step back and let me handle it, and then if I need you, I'll reach out. Yeah. But I think that's up to the attorney to sort of identify, right? And again, I try to, and thankfully, the brokers that I work with specifically, and I'll shout out Keller Williams Brokers, and I think that's a testament sort of to the education tools that you have. Brokers that I've worked with have, really had the knowledge and sort of the background and the wherewithal to be able to navigate some complex transactions, which I can't say the same for every broker, but I do think that, when I identify a broker who, has the experience to help really streamline and get the deal to the closing table, I'm going to use that. And I think sometimes the attorneys might see, the broker and say, I don't think you have the experience. That I can understand. But then I think sometimes the attorneys, unfortunately, I just think it's sort of, this mentality, which, again, I'm in an industry where, there's a lot of older attorneys, people that have been doing the same thing for 30, 40 years. They sort of have their way of doing things, and this is just the way that they do it, and they're not willing to change that.
So that's interesting, right? How much change has been a lot, I'm sure, right? So, but how much changes from an attorney back in the '90s till today?
A significant amount of change, and I can tell you that because I still work with attorneys that were licensed in the '90s, so I could sort of see again And again, this is not. I'm not trying to paint a broad, brush on every attorney, but there are some attorneys that still, they don't utilize certain tools that we have to our advantage. For instance, and this might sound silly, but like even redlining, right? Redlining a contract, right? When we negotiate a contract back and forth, generally speaking, my practice, if I'm representing a seller, is I'll send the contract in a Word format so that it's easily accessible for the attorney to, redline and make changes on Word in that system so that, we could track the changes and make it, easy for everybody to understand.
Did you ever, silly question, did you ever send out a contract where it was not touched?
It is not a silly question because it's actually, I've been asked this before, and there's I think one instance, yes,
really?
I have in my mind.
Wow. Okay.
Where, because that's why it's in my mind and it stands out. I had one time where I sent out a contract to a buyer's attorney. I represented the seller. And generally speaking, we're always just waiting for them to send comments back, right? Like, that's just what we expect. And then he just sent me a partially executed contract with a deposit check, no changes.
Wow.
And I was like, and I told my client, and I was like, this, just so you know, I was like, this is not standard, but thankfully, they've accepted all of our changes. So
wow.
I'm not gonna say anything. I mean, I'm not gonna. But yeah, I mean, I think that the attorneys, some attorneys. And look, and I want to say this because I really do think it impacts the deal. When it's hard to redline a contract and to get only a contract in like a PDF form, or it's like, it's scanned sideways, or it's difficult to edit, it just makes the deal take longer to get done. Right. The beauty about transactional real estate is that everybody really wants the same thing. We all want the deal to close, which I can't say the same for litigation, right? Litigation's adversarial, people, there's two sides, and, everybody wants their side to prevail. But in transactional, you want the same thing, which is you want the deal to close. I don't think anybody in a transactional deal doesn't want the deal to go through. So that's sort of, that's sort of my mindset, and how I approach that. And I want to do everything I can to get to the deal to the closing table. Right? And that's what I do for my clients while protecting their interests. And then again, my broker partners as well, understanding that this is the goal and we want to get the deal to the table. I'm not here to hold up the deal. I'm here to make sure that the deal gets done properly and gets to the closing table. That's really what I'm looking to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say probably 98% of the attorneys out there are doing that, right? Maybe even more.
I would say, yeah. And again, I think that, usually that, again, I think that they all want the same thing, but I think
looking out for your client.
Yeah, while looking out for your client, of course. And I think that, again, there's certain things, back to even, again, the redlining, sending a contract in Word format, these little things, it ends up just sort of making things a little bit more difficult because they're just not adopting the sort of resources that we have today, because they're just used to doing the things that they do. And again, I do think it slows deals down. And I think deals in New York City specifically, you know, you can make or break a deal over a weekend or over the course of a few days. I mean, other offers come in, our client loses the deal because we couldn't get comments out quick enough because, you know, it's hard to edit a contract that they had sent. And then, you know, again, it just makes things a little bit more difficult. I do think most attorneys, I mean, I think every attorney I would hope would want the same thing and get the deal done. But I do think that sometimes the approach, again, sort of responsiveness, that's the number one thing I hear from attorneys, right? You know, my attorney's not getting back to me. We're not hearing from the one side. The one thing that I always say, and I say this to all my, you know, clients and brokers, silence in real estate is the deal killer.
That's right.
Silence kills deals.
That's right.
So if you don't hear anything, it's probably not a good thing.
So what's like you get ready to send out a deal. What's that one or two things that you need for the broker to actually get you to make sure it's going to go smoothly and work with you, not against you?
That's a great question. I think then this is something that I do when I talk to other brokers too. The deal sheet. The deal sheet,
Most
when
important,
when
right?
it's filled out
One of the most
correctly
important things.
and completely, is incredibly helpful. And unfortunately, I see sometimes where the deal sheet's sort of circulated and it has basically just bare bones information. It just has names, purchase price, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't have detailed, you know, any details about contingencies, whether that's mortgage contingency, appraisal contingency. Even when you start getting to luxury, sort of luxury deals where you're talking about, you know, artwork, certain, you know, speaker systems, you know, movie theater systems, TVs, things like that, these built-ins, things that are, like, you know, that come with the unit that the buyer is expecting to get. These things are not included on the deal sheet. So it sort of just makes it harder for us to understand what exactly is included in that offer. And then we sort of have to negotiate that as the attorneys, which again, we'll do. But I think if we sort of come into it with as much information as we possibly can have on the deal sheet to help make our jobs easier, it's just going to make the deal go smoother.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say the deal sheet's number one. And then I think in terms of co-ops condos, obviously the board, you know, the board approval process, the board package process, that's crucial, right? The brokers are sort of, you know, heavily involved in that process with the clients. I generally will be there as a, you know, as an asset to them and sort of, you know, to answer any questions that they have about the application itself. But the brokers are the ones who are putting it together with the clients. And, you know, that's something that you need to really rely on as the attorney, that the brokers are going to be doing specifically in the timeframes that are required under our contract, right? Because real estate contracts have certain deadlines with when the board application has to be submitted, and so forth. So I would say, you know, those two things in a traditional, you know, co-op condo transaction in New York City, I would say those are the biggest things that I look for. And then walkthrough issues, that I rely heavily on the brokers, obviously, because they're the ones who are doing the walkthrough, right? If you're performing the walkthrough, I'm not there, right? So I can only rely on what you're telling me, photos, things like that. So that's what I really rely on.
How many times did that come out screwed up, where they're telling you one thing and it's not?
In the context of what, walkthroughs or just
walkthrough,
in general?
just in general. Like,
I mean, look, I think that goes really back to, it doesn't happen often for me, but I think that sort of goes back to, you know, the lines of communication that I like to
and
have
laziness,
throughout the
right?
deal. Yeah, and I think the walkthrough, look, I think if you're gonna, you know, you're about to close a deal, you should, again, I tell my clients this every time I review a contract, the walkthrough, most important.
Yeah, I agree.
Take that incredibly seriously. Don't let anybody pressure you. I've heard stories where listing agents are saying, you know, pick it up. Like, why are we here still, you know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever. Take your time. If you're going to spend the kind of money you're going to spend, and in most cases, you know, you're making the largest investment in your entire life for most people, right, is they're buying their first home or whatever it is. You got to take that seriously. And I always tell my clients that. I tell my brokers that as well, right? You want to make sure you take this seriously, because if you miss something, and
You don't get a second chance.
You don't get a second chance. It's very difficult to go back, and I've had it happen rarely, but I've had it happen where clients will reach out to me, you know, a week or 2 weeks after the closing happens, and they say, you know, I did the walkthrough. I didn't actually check the stove. I didn't actually turn on the dishwasher. I just assumed that it was going to be working, and now it's not working. We're trying it. Unfortunately, these things are very difficult to sort of go back and unwind. So I always tell the brokers and the clients, take the walkthrough very, very seriously. I think it's the most important opportunity for you to make sure that the property is being delivered in the condition that it should be delivered in.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just remember back in the day, I was on a deal. This is when I was an agent, and I think I was a seller's broker, and the buyer's broker was like rushing them through, and I was like, don't do this, man. Make sure you pay attention, because you're not going to get it.
No, that's a big mistake.
And of course, there was a problem. And I remember at the closing table, and this was horrible, that the buyer started yelling at his broker because, you know, the listing agent was telling you to freaking take your time. Why were you rushing through this?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it got blamed on the buyer, on the agent.
Yeah. I think for young agents, though, again, if they can learn one thing too, the walkthrough, again, take those incredibly seriously, because I think everybody's excited, right? You want to get to the closing table, you want to get the closing completed. That's when most people get paid.
That's right.
But again, at the end of the day, we're here to make sure our clients are protected. And I think from the broker standpoint, even from the attorneys, but again, if you want to be a career broker in this business, referrals are going to be basically your number one, and people are going to refer you out if they really felt like you took good care of them and really were looking out for their best interests. And that's one of the times and opportunities to do that.
Why don't very rarely see this either? And I used to do this back in the day. I used to get things signed during the walkthrough.
That's smart. Yeah, they do that for sponsor sales. They have like the punch list. So new development, they have the punch list, which is sort of similar to that concept. I absolutely would think that would be something that would smart to implement. I don't really see that for resales as much. It's sort of just, they'll maybe send an email with a list, but for sponsor, new development, the punch list items, I think that if they adopted that for, regular resales,
easier,
that would be,
right?
it would make it a lot easier. It would sort of get rid of any ambiguity as to what issues may exist at the time of the closing, at the time of the walkthrough, and what issues that they might want the seller to address before they actually close.
I remember it saving one of my sellers, and I think this was coincidence. Tested the boiler, everything was fine, everything got signed off. They actually had their the inspector come back with them during the walkthrough.
Yes,
which I
I've
thought
seen
was
that.
really interesting.
Yeah,
too.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the inspector checked everything, and everything was fine. And I think it freaking crapped out overnight. Just happened.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't turned on for a couple of days after,
Yeah.
maybe a month after I think the house was bought in like April or May or whatever.
Yeah, and
so
they didn't. Yeah.
They didn't really put it on. And then when it went on in the winter, it crapped out. And I remember having to go back, and that's what saved us. It saved my seller. With, hey, look, you signed off on this, that was working. We can't do anything.
Yeah.
My seller's not buying you a new boiler.
No,
you
look.
own the house now for
Look,
3
in
months.
those instances, I think that that's sort of one of those outlier instances where that happens. But yeah, I mean, even a week or even a day after the closing,
Could happen,
something happens.
Never know.
It's like that's why you want to take your opportunity. And you mentioned having the inspector come back.
Right.
I've actually seen that probably more recently than past years, where they bring their inspector, the original inspector.
Sure. I don't know
did
why
the
that doesn't
inspection.
happen a lot more. I think that's,
You know what it is? I think that it's a little. I think agents are a little discouraged. I think listing agents generally have like an issue because they think that an inspector's coming back again. They like want to make sure we're not going to do anything else. But it's their right to do it, right? They have the opportunity
especially
to do
now
that.
with the new law changes, right?
Yeah.
If I'm working for the buyer, then I'm doing everything in my buyer's power.
No, yeah,
right?
you should.
So-
And I think, and I don't think that, and I think agents should understand that. And for the most part, I think that most agents work very, very well.
Sure.
It's a very collaborative effort in terms of getting deals to the table. But yeah, I could see. I've seen instances where like a listing agent might say, "Hey, like I don't want you to bring an inspector back. Like this is not an inspection. You're just doing a walkthrough." But look, I mean, they can bring whoever they want. I mean, again, of course, if they want to, of course, they can't raise things that
Of course.
that they're not permitted to raise pursuant to our contract. But
That's right.
if they want to bring an inspector back, they want to have their parents come. I've had that happen. Parents come with the children who are buying the property. They can bring whoever they want. I don't really see that why that's an issue. I don't have an issue with that. Look, again, this is the biggest purchase of their life for the most part.
You want them to be happy.
Yeah,
and
you
you want them to come back to you.
Yes,
so
I,
why
as the
do
broker
that?
too, 100%. You want them to be happy. You want them to feel like you really, took good care of them, and that's what I think separates the broker who's looking for the next deal versus the career broker, right?
Yep.
The brokers who make this a career are the brokers who really think long term and think, okay, I'm not just thinking about that next deal. I'm not just thinking about closing this next deal. I'm thinking about making sure that I'm, cementing sort of my reputation in this community, in this industry,
Sure.
and that's how you're really going to become
So
a career broker.
how often are you like talking to the agent about things like that? Like where you're sitting? Because when I was selling, I don't sell anymore, obviously. But when I was selling, me and the attorney had such a like we were talking outside before.
Yeah.
Great relationship. You want to handle it? Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
Handle it. I'll do something else. I'll go watch a ball game.
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
handle it. Thank you. But where you're on the same page, where it's where the communication is so good, and I know you're going to say probably 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Where it's so good that that client is going to want to come back and do more deals with you.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a time where that's not the case, where you're not looking into that, or is it more pretty much all the time where you and the agent and the mortgage guy are working side by side throughout the whole deal, making that best experience? And then what was like one of the greatest stories with that, if you have any, where it was so wellly put together that it actually got the deal done. Like it was a deal from hell that was actually able to close because you guys were so in sync.
Yeah,
And I know it's hard to
I mean,
single out.
to answer that first part, I mean, I think that having, and this sort of goes along the lines of like brokers in general, right? Building this team around the client to sort of put them in the best position to have a successful transaction, whether you're the buyer or the seller. For me personally, I think it makes all the difference. I think that when I work with a broker who I have a great relationship with and that I've closed several deals with, our communication, again, whether it's texting, calling, emailing, there's no really chance of us not being able to get in touch with each other. And again, in terms of, deals,
With that being said, Scott, what's your best way of communication? Texting, calls, emails?
email. I would say email. I say email to all my clients. Email me, and then if you want to set up a call, we can absolutely set up a call immediately. I have some brokers that have my direct phone number, texting, but I generally say email. I'm always on my email.
Okay.
I mean, you probably know, or somebody knows. Attorneys, we're constantly checking my email. I'm actually not checking my email right now, which is giving me anxiety. No, I'm just
I was going to say. Yeah.
So this might be the longest time I've not checked my email, but. I usually check my email constantly, so that's the best way to reach me. But yeah, I mean, for the brokers, back to the question, I think that, I personally think it's what could make, a deal go through versus a deal potentially not go through. And again, back to what we said earlier, which, silence is the deal killer in real estate. If you don't hear from your attorney or the broker,
It scares me. Yeah.
it does. It scares you. It makes you think, like, especially if you're in the contract negotiation stage, right?
Sure.
Because then you start thinking, okay, do they have another offer?
Right.
Are they rescinding? Like, what's going on? So that's where you really want to be in communication. Of course, like after the contract's signed, we're working through certain things. Maybe
Calms down a
there's
little
less
bit, yeah.
communication in that regard. But then when you get closer to the final walkthrough, we're going through this, especially for these sponsor, punch list items. These are important. Sometimes the punch list items can be significant. We want to make sure everything is like itemized correctly, and we also have to make sure it's signed off, right? The sponsor and the client have to both sign off on that punch list. So that's when the attorney gets involved and make sure it's signed. But I think that for me, again, I have great relationships with the brokers, specifically a lot of brokers from Keller Williams, but throughout the city. And that's just kind of how I work. I feel like we have a younger generation of brokers. I think they're very on top of it. They're trying to communicate any way they can. They want to make sure these deals get done. So that's, for me, that's just how I work. I think that, and look, if it's not that type of deal where I feel like that's not the way it's gonna go, then of course I'll just deal directly with the client more, and however they wanna. The client for me is the most important, right? So if the client ever wants to get in touch with me, I mean, they're always gonna get in touch with me.
Sure.
And if that's through the broker or if it's just the client directly, I mean, it really depends on every deal. But I have had deals in the past where I feel like, they definitely maybe had not otherwise have gone through, but for, my relationships with the brokers and being able to sort of help things go through. I've had some pretty crazy deals. I'm trying to think of what I can talk about.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah, but I'll just say this.
But they were there.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I think that I've had deals that would absolutely not have closed, but for my ability to communicate with the brokers and then have sort of an all-hands call with clients and sort of use that collaborative effort to sort of get the deal to the table. Whereas, again, there are attorneys that I know, if the broker was like, we need you on this phone call with the client, they might say, can you just take care of it? Like, this doesn't really sound like a contract issue or anything. It sounds like more of just like getting the deal done.
And he's in the deal.
And he's just sort of like, I'm here to make sure the deal gets, closed, legally speaking, but not necessarily to broker certain things. My mentality goes back to what I've said before, which is that I'm trying to get these deals closed. Like, that's my goal.
What's the majority of deals that close? Like, going to contract to finish, was it like 99%?
I think it's like 98%.
98%?
Yeah. I think it's pretty significant. And that's really, again, that's a testament to like transactional real estate, which is that everybody sort of wants the same thing. You can pretty much work through most things. Most things can get worked out.
What's the one thing you can't work through? Is it money?
It's a good question. What you can't work through. Walk-through issues, you can always sort of you can figure that out with credits. Title issues, too, depending on the extent of the title defect, you can even potentially, violations are not uncommon in New York City, specifically for, single-family homes, multifamily homes. I don't know. I would say I feel like most things can get worked out. I would say title defects, but it's significant. It would have to be a significant defect. Where
what's worse, that or the mortgage side? Is a mortgage, like, I don't know, like somebody buying a car like 2 days before the close.
Yeah,
or
so
something like
I
that.
have
You know
I
what
have
mean?
seen
Not that that happens.
I've
a lot.
seen, and again, that sort of goes back to relationships with the even the loan officers
Sure.
and the bankers. You can work through even things like that. I've had clients make purchases or didn't disclose certain things
Sure.
on their original application that came out in underwriting right before we were about to close. Again, these are things that for other deals, depending on the relationships of the parties and how it's sort of communicated, could sort of blow up a deal.
Correct.
And if it's nuanced and you understand what's happening and people are communicating, you can work through it, whether it's having to delay the closing, perhaps if you already scheduled. Like these are things that, again, you sort of need an all hands mentality,
that's right.
because if you start throwing around, oh, we're not, we just want to adjourn the closing. I mean, if I'm representing a buyer, the seller's attorney is going to say, what do you mean we're adjourning the closing? We've had this scheduled for a week, 2 weeks. What's going on? And they're going to think the worst. So again, there's a nuance to it. And that's when you really have to, when you have that relationship with the banker, loan officer, even the attorney on the other side, right? I have great relationships with other attorneys that I've worked with that do an excellent job. And that's also one thing you're looking for, right? As not even from the, if I'm representing a buyer or they're representing a seller, if, your attorneys are, working well together, that's going to help the deal move forward too. So these are all factors that sort of come into play.
With that being said, too, the odds of you working with the attorney on the other side slim to none, or most likely it's been done before where you guys work together?
In New York City, gets to become a pretty small circle.
Sure.
I would say I've worked with a lot of attorneys, on several transactions, some in multiple transactions at one time. So I would say, there's always,
Especially the co-op world.
condo world. It's like anything. It's like you realize very quickly it's a pretty small inner circle of, like, when it boils down to it, it's just a lot of the same. You start to see a lot of the same faces. So I would say more often than not, I'm usually dealing with a lot of the same attorneys. And then, occasionally I'll have, an attorney here and there that I haven't worked with. But no, we're always happy to work with new attorneys. Again, I like to sort of, see how everybody works and work with them to, like I said, get the deal done is really the most important
Sure,
thing.
that's the most. And where do you do predominantly most of your deals? Is it Long Island, Queens, the city?
Queens and Manhattan, I would say, are predominantly where we do a lot of our deals. We represent clients for every borough, but I would say Queens and Manhattan are predominantly where we close deals. A lot of co-ops and condos in New York County sponsor new development, and then in Queens we have a lot of multifamily, commercial. There's some warehouses. Long Island City and Astoria are big, really, really hot areas right now where people
Do you
are
do any
buying.
Co-ops in Queens and
Yeah,
like
we
Whitestone?
do
and-
co-ops. Yeah, Whitestone, Kew Gardens, where
Kew Gardens,
Kew Gardens where my
obviously.
offices are. Forest Hills, they have a lot of co-ops, condos. Yeah, we do see them. With those areas too. And there's a lot of for sale. There's a lot of inventory still, but there's also a lot of people who live there for very long periods of time. They've lived there for 60, 70 years in some cases. I've done a lot of estate work, like in terms of selling units that were owned by an estate, things like that. But yeah, I would say it's a mix, but I would say predominantly Queens and Manhattan, and then Long Island. Of course, I have roots in Long Island, so I represent a lot of clients on Long Island as
And that's
well.
mostly residential.
Mostly single family residential. Occasionally you'll see, there's certain in Nassau, there's certain condo co-op developments that are there that you'll see, but it's really mostly single family.
Did you ever work with Mizell and Hankin?
Yeah.
Yeah, great guys.
Yeah, Hankin, yep.
They're still around those.
Yeah, they are. Actually, I think.
They still
wanna
represent the co-ops, right?
Yes, I think actually they might have just reached out to me on an email. They might be representing the lender actually on one deal that I just did.
Oh, that's fine. Is
Yeah.
Jeff or
It was his office. I'm not sure who the actual attorney handling it, but it was one of their
so
one of their
funny.
staff.
See, it's the same people that are
Yeah,
still
you see a lot of
around.
the same
It's-
people. Yeah, a lot of the same people, especially in the co-op payoff world, with the payoffs for the representing the payoff bank. You start seeing the same names.
I remember we used to, not to get off topic, when I was an agent, I worked for a company called America's Bravest.
Okay.
And it was a small shop in Whitestone. We did predominantly co-ops in Clearview Gardens. And we used to time our closings. Our best closing took us 17 minutes on a co-op. That was me, Joe Angelo.
That beats
Jeff.
my record slightly.
Does it really?
My record is 24 minutes.
24 minutes. Yeah, the stupid shit we would do just to entertain
we
ourselves.
do. We still do it as the attorneys.
Do you really?
We do. I don't do it but I do look, and that it really goes back to, and I've had cases where everybody at the table sort of sitting there being like, this was insanely quick.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's a testament to the people that are involved,
That's
that are
right.
really on it and are really, prepared.
That's right.
I sort of pride myself on that. And again, it goes back to sort of the work ethic in terms of just, I go to every closing table prepared. like not
Sure.
looking at the file for the first time.
Yeah, of course.
Like I want to make sure I understand what's happening, what's going on with this file, you know, where the client's at with any walkthrough issues potentially that come up, things of that nature, excuse me. And I think that's really a testament to everybody being, you know, sort of on top of it, and everybody sees that and appreciates that. Clients, most importantly,
Of course,
appreciate that when you're at the table and they're like, man, I really thought this was going to be a little bit more intensive.
Life-changing,
like,
yeah.
and then we just, you know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes goes
Done.
by, you hand them the keys and say congratulations, and they're like, I thought this was going to be more painful. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, we try to make it as painless as possible
That's
for the
right.
client. I mean, that's what they remember. I mean, that's why people come back. I mean, we built our business primarily on just referrals. I mean, we only just started marketing really pretty heavily this past year. I mean,
Wow.
before that, it was only word of mouth. It was only just
So-
referrals, reviews, things like that.
With that being said, I'm sure you do. You set goals, and
Of course,
I'm sure
yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
business plans
Yeah.
and all of that
Yeah.
good stuff as an attorney, right? Like, what would your goals be for 2026 on amount of closings? Are you looking at it that way? How do you?
So I look at it, volume. I usually look at the volume of closings, like sort of on like a projected figure of how many closings we want to do a year. You know, we have another attorney coming on. He's actually St. John's. He's in his third year at St. John's, and he's taking the bar in July, and then he's coming on to our team next year. So I'm excited for that because he'll help, you know, help grow our transactional division. But yeah, I set goals. I mean, numbers of closings. There's things like The Real Deal always posts top attorneys in New York City.
Sure. Yep.
I got my eye on those. I'm definitely, you know, I'm going for the top spot.
They do trends like they do for the real estate.
Yeah, they do
market,
trends.
for the
They do number of.
attorneys
They base it off of Acris. They base it off of, you know, recorded deeds and transactions. That's
also.
how they. That's how
Is
they
it more
sort of.
transactions or volume? Probably transactions, right?
It's by both. They'll do
both.
so they'll do volume and then transactions.
Same
So they'll
thing
do
as
like
us then.
they'll do the number of like the total gross, like whatever the actual volume of deals that they did, and then the actual number. And in some cases it's funny because some of the firms, I think number one was Skadden, which is a very big law firm, one of the biggest law firms in the country. I think they had 3 transactions and they were number one because it was like
That's
it was like $1.5 billion
Yeah,
because
deals.
they closed like three deals that were just like the biggest deals
Yep.
that happened. So that's always interesting. But then you always
We were
have
talking about this last night.
yeah. Then you have like the transactional like firms that are doing volume, 400 deals, 500 deals a year, things like that. So again,
We saw one last night. I think me and Erica were talking about. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the number of transactions was like 25,000 transactions.
yeah.
$5 billion.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like,
some-
are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
well, like, where is this?
Yeah,
right?
some
You know,
insane
insane number.
And that's it. Look, real estate is one of those things. I mean, there's so many deals closing, especially in New York City. We're one of the biggest markets. There's deals closing every single day. You know, there's a crazy amount of deals happening here. So
Well, this has been really interesting and really enlightening. You really helped me see that world as an attorney, and I really appreciate you.
I
And
appreciate you having me. This is
where
awesome.
do you see the market going in 26? Like, what are you seeing now?
I see a lot of. I mean, look, there's a lot of buyers out there still. You know, I think inventory is good. I haven't really seen it slow down. If anything, I've seen sort of it pick up. There's still a lot of cash buyers out there. I've seen that. A trend that I've seen, I mean, and maybe the brokers should speak on this more, but something that I've seen is a lot of parents buying for children.
Just talking about that, yeah.
I think that's become a very common sort of thing that we see because, you know, children living at home and then eventually, you know, they graduate college and then they're going to, you know, either they're going to live where they go to school or they just graduated and their parents are going to buy them something. And the reason for that partially, I think, is because the parents want to also have a place to visit them.
Sure.
So I think I've seen that as a pretty, you know, pretty significant trend this past year. But I think the market's
And then
strong.
What would you recommend the broker in that position to do? Like, because right, it's a weird position to be in because you're catering to the kids because they're the ones buying it,
Yeah.
but the money is the parents. So
It is interesting, and I've done a lot of these. I've done
Yeah,
a
I'm
lot
sure
of
you
these.
did.
I've done a lot of these transactions, and honestly, every one of them has been a pleasure. And I mean, again, that sort of goes back to the relationship, right? Because we are all on the same page. The phone calls that we do, the initial phone call with the broker and the clients, that includes the daughter or the son, and then the parents. We're all on the same page.
page.
Everybody's on the same page. It's not like we're excluding anybody on all the emails. Everybody's on the same emails. You know, I think that's sort of a testament to the communication, right? You want to make sure. Look, technically, I guess the parents or the clients, if they're the ones that are on the contract too and they're buying it, but you know, the child is also, you know, involved, and you want to make them feel like, because then this is
Sure.
also a big deal for them as well in a lot of ways. So we make everybody feel like, they're involved, they're up to date on what's going on, they understand what's going on, which is the most important thing. I think that clients understanding what's going on when they're making one of the largest investments in their lives is important.
Sure.
I don't. Sometimes I feel like, and I've just had somebody email me before who wants me to review something on an issue for a new construction that had flooding in it now. And they reached out to me and they said they don't want to use their attorney that they used for the transaction because the person never really reviewed the contract with them and they didn't understand what they signed. So again, these are things that happen. I think people have to really understand, and I take the time, and we take the time, and my team and I take the time to explain the contract, go over what it is that they're signing. Look, you can trust your attorney, and I think that's important, but also at the same time, you should understand what it is that you're signing and what you're getting involved with, because again, in most cases, this is the largest transaction that you'll be involved with. Yeah. So I think that's education, letting the client know and understand what's going on is invaluable. And I think that really, goes back to the referrals that you'll get from that, and they'll remember you, and they'll remember to tell their friends and say, hey, look, this was the person who really, took the time to explain it, and they'll appreciate it. And I think that's very important.
It's funny you said that, because I've done deals with people where I'm saying this person's never coming back to me. I was so direct with them where you're like, there's no chance in a million years. And 3 days later, they're calling me back because they love me because I was the one that was honest with them.
People appreciate honesty. People appreciate you telling them the things that like others might not consider even being important enough to tell them, or just they don't tell them. And it's like, if you really are upfront with people, that goes a long way. For brokers, attorneys, loan officers, whatever it is, I think in real estate specifically, again, people want to feel like, they're really being protected, as would I, right? If I'm buying a property, I would want the same thing. I would want the team around me to feel like that they're really looking out for me and that I can rely on them, because I'm not familiar with this process and I'm not, I don't understand every step of this process. So I think that's incredibly important in this industry.
So is there anything that we left out that you would love to get your point across today? Just
I'm trying to think. I think we touched on a lot of good.
I definitely want to have you back again too.
Yeah, I would love to.
This.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, this was awesome. And I think all I want to say to you, I mean, again, I work with a lot of Keller Williams agents. I think, again, I've only good things to say. I think it's a testament to, again, the education tools that you guys give them, which I've been a part of and I've seen, and you give them a bunch of resources to really, be successful in this business, which is hard to do, right? Sometimes you don't get that in other, other companies, other agencies, things like that. You really help, the brokers sort of have the tools to succeed, which I think in this business is invaluable too. I think it's important.
I do appreciate that. One more thing, one piece of advice to give an agent to work with a great attorney like yourself, what's that one piece of advice that you want to give them?
One piece of advice is the advice that I give most people is don't ever be afraid to ask questions. I'm still never afraid to ask questions. I always ask questions. My brother and I have this saying, it's the practice of law, right? We're practicing law.
Right.
We're not experts in law because law is ever evolving. It
changing,
changes every day, every month, every year. So we're practicing. So don't be afraid to ask questions. We ask questions every day. I ask questions every day. You're not going to know everything. So I would say don't be afraid to ask questions, because questions are what's going to help you get to the top and succeed.
Well, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
This
for
was
having
awesome.
me. Yeah, this is
Thanks
great.
so much, pal.
Appreciate it. Thank
God
you so
bless.
much.
Be
Yeah.
good. Thanks,
Thanks.
buddy.